Time for something I haven't done in a while. A content warning. The subject of this review contains violence, sexual references, offensive language, and nudity. You have been warned. Good evening, snitches. I'm the Animaniac, and this year I begin Halloween by revisiting a subject of one of my older reviews. It was one of the videos I deleted before YouTube enacted COPPA. Anybody remember that? So I want to take another shot at the movie to see if I can do better. Once again, I give you The Haunted World of El Superbeasto. Directed by Rob Zombie and based on the comic book series of the same name, it sees the titular hero rescue a stripper from the clutches of Dr. Satan, who needs her to marry him in order to gain the power to take over the world. Beasto enlists the help of his sister to help him bring down the little madman. Before we go any further, I noticed a lot of you who watch my videos aren't subscribed. If you enjoy these videos and want to be the first to know when a new one will be up, be sure to ring that bell after you subscribe. My next goal is 500 subscribers, and only you can help me get there. And if you'd like to see these videos early, subscribe to me on Rumble. Link is in the description and pinned comment below. There's very little info about this movie. That includes how much involvement Rob Zombie had in it, because he's the producer, director, and co-wrote it with Tom Papa, stand-up comedian and the voice of El Superbeasto in this picture. The movie was set to come out around 2006 and 2007, but it got pushed back until 2009 and released straight to video. And Zombie was finishing up his remake of Halloween, did some touring, and started work on the sequel. In the cartoon reviewer sphere, this movie is barely mentioned. Of the few people I saw talk about this flick, link Spumco as being responsible for the animation duties, except Spumco filed for bankruptcy and closed their doors in 2006 because John Kay was afraid of further legal action against him after Adult Party Cartoon. The studios who worked on this movie are Carbuncle Cartoons and Big Star Animation, two studios who did work with Spumco on Adult Party Cartoon. If you folks remember how the characters of Ren and Stimpy look and move, that's how the people in this movie are animated, except it's much smoother than Adult Party Cartoon. Where the movie takes place is somewhere called Halloween Town. It's a place stuffed to the gills with pop culture references spanning over a century. They range from old Hollywood films like Sunset Boulevard, Universal monster movies like The Creature from the Black Lagoon, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and Frankenstein. Later iconic horror movies like Alien, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and The Shining. Rob Zombie's own movies up to that point, mainly House of a Thousand Corpses, The Devil's Rejects, and his version of Halloween. And a few other references that don't really belong.
I just lost another goddamn pilot to that punk from Malcolm in the Middle!
That doesn't make sense because Frankie Muniz retired from acting when that show ended. The amount of references in this movie makes me want to devote a video series explaining them, and I would also do that for seasons of TV shows. Let me know if that's something you'd like to see. This movie gets these in various ways, quoting dialogue, characters making appearances, or other visual references like Beasto wearing John Travolta's disco suit from Saturday Night Fever. This movie could be a pop culture history buff's wet dream, outside of being fuel for a normal wet dream. Halloween Town is a place where most of the women are young stunners. The others are older women who Beasto wouldn't look twice at, celebrities like Courtney Love and Barbara Streisand, and a feminist who would be made a joke out of. They have an hourglass figure and big boobs. Not Dr. Pussycat big, where it looks like they're about to break a button on her coat, but the type that still fits their body. That's right, folks. I do have a limit, in this department. Those puppies, as Jerry Lawler would say, are often shown throughout the flick. Even the monsters are sexy. And to sum up how the men act when they catch glimpses of the women,
Daddy, you better get the best for me. Hey, Daddy.
Beasto's goal is to save a stripper so he'll think she'll have sex with him as thanks. And he even stops in the middle of a cemetery when he spots Bride of Frankenstein moaning in a pool because another monster is performing cunnilingus on her. Along with him, Dr. Satan and an old man all leer at women, usually for a joke. Along with bodies being ripped apart and blood spraying everywhere, if it's a normal part of the movie's world, can it stop being shocking? Can being repeatedly exposed to female nudity, swearing, and gore make one numb? Yes, I'd say so. I'll get into specifics later. Now I'll be moving on to talking about how this movie handles its stories. With this, I'll give a summary for each part, talk about the characters involved, how they work off each other, and make comparisons to the comic to see if they improved it, or what they could have brought over instead. So, spoilers ahead on both fronts. So there's a cretin who calls himself Dr. Satan, a reference to House of a Thousand Corpses. He's unleashed a swarm of bats with cameras which he uses to spy on women, looking for his unholy bride, which he does when he sees Velvet Von Black perform at the Haunted Palace. However, Beasto notices her as well and becomes enamored, enough to rescue her when Otto is sent to bring her to the doctor. El Superbeasto is a former pro wrestler, star, and globe-trotting superhero. Out of all the characters in this flick, he remains intact when adapted. He's an egomaniacal ladies' man that I find hard to like in both sources. His intro song as he's heading out to the Haunted Palace covers him being adopted by a wrestling family, coming up as an amateur going pro, and losing himself to various vices. A detail they leave out of his backstory is him going to rehab, which would make what he does in this movie more frustrating than it already is. The movie's soundtrack was done by Hard and Firm. Their approach to the songs are very comedic. These intro songs do give off the impression that this movie was meant to be a TV show, though. Through the song, there are references to his other adventures. The clown he decapitates with his comb is one of Bobo's goons, and the Cyclops he makes his eye pop out, that's Lord Liam, the villain from the Simon Deadmarsh Monster Hunter section of the comics. Dr. Satan is a mad scientist looking for the woman who will help him become powerful. The comic version of this character has a great, intimidating look and aura that is chipped away the more you learn about him throughout. This one is looking for a bride simply to impregnate. The movie version does away with it in the first few seconds of his introduction. He's now a scrawny nerd in a lab coat and throws fits when people get his name wrong or don't take him seriously.
Steve Wachowski! How many times do I have to tell them it's Dr. Satan? Dr. Satan! Dr. Satan!
Paul Giamatti is one of many notable actors in this movie. There's also Rosario Dawson, Danny Trejo, Ken Foree, Tom Kenny, Rob Paulson, and Charlie Adler, among others. Giamatti plays it up as Dr. Satan. His gorilla assistant, Otto, runs through how he'll become powerful. The song goes between singing and explaining what the lines mean. Those are fine for the first and last two lines, despite being unnecessary for an adult audience. Then there's the second line, bring her back for a meat pole ride. The explanation after the line makes it vague despite me knowing what it means. And later on, Dr. Satan doesn't do that. When he meets Velvet for the first time, she blows smoke into his face and doesn't address that. instead going into worshipping her and offering up half his stuff while proposing. However, later in the movie, as she is preparing for the wedding, after Dr. Satan gets distracted by her butt, she does pull out a gun and freezes her after she gives him lip, calling him a fool. But not even that moment was enough to change her tune about him, at least not enough to keep her top on when coming down the aisle. And based on what happens later, he could have had her frozen in the Hall of Ex-Wives when he becomes powerful. Otto is Dr. Satan's gorilla assistant. The comic version wouldn't mind admiring a woman in a knuckle-headed way, and was even seen watching a game show. The movie version is well-spoken and put off by things and people who are trashy. You'll know what I mean later. With this character, there are a couple of times where the animation doesn't match up.
This is it. Make yourself comfortable. No, don't. Dr. Satan, I won't see you.
This distraction is the size of Dr. Satan. And Velvet Von Black is a stripper who performs at the Haunted Palace. In the comic, she has shoulder-length hair, a beauty mark on her cheek, and based on the dialogue of "Smoochy, smoochy, my big, strong, handsome brute," and "Hey, sugar plum, Mama's got something real special for you," her voice would sound real sweet. I'm not sure if Rosario Dawson would be able to pull it off, or if I want to hear her perform the original dialogue. In the movie, she's now a white woman with a black woman's voice done by Rosario Dawson, speaking in a vulgar manner. And she's the only human performer at the Haunted Palace. Aiding in developing her ego as well is her being a featured attraction.
I think I left a nickel on stage. Consider it my donation to the sad-ass hoe club.
She's introduced in this flick during a dance routine, with a song sung by a carnival barker and a singer with two heads. They sing about just how hot she is, her ability to make her breasts and buttocks bigger by blowing into her thumb, and the fact that just because you have a stiffy doesn't mean she won't stiff you. I find that claim hard to believe in a world where nearly every woman is worthy of a woo! Even the monsters. And when the barker utters her name for the first time, she gets topless right away. It makes me want to seek out older strip teasers, like this lizard joke or burlesque routines, because those give off the impression that they want me to want to look at them. Come on, Velvet. Make me want to see the girls. After she gets kidnapped by Otto to be his master's bride, she immediately gets on the gorilla's case just with her crude and inane ranting, and boasting about how attractive she is, and getting angry at Otto for not being interested in her.
What are you, queer?
One thing she does share with Otto is that Dawson's acting doesn't match the animation, which is too lively.
Flat screen. Sweet. Better be fucking plasma. Better be a fucking mini bar. Ooh, hot damn, that is. You did good, monkey.
The characters aren't the only part of this movie that changed. The story changed too. I'll address the other parts later on. They added a section at the beginning where Beasto shoots a porn movie and casts beautiful women, under the disguise of it really being an art film. This is definitely a relic of a pre-Me Too world. This is to show Beasto's dishonest nature, how he's a badass in his own right when the women he casted are actually a werewolf and Gorgon, and a reason for him to go to the Haunted Palace. There are a handful of women who auditioned that don't make sense to be there. I can see Courtney Love wanting to do it, and the actress from Sunset Boulevard so desperate to be on camera again that she'd take the job. But a classically trained theater actress, a feminist, and classier women like these? I figured these were the type who were smart enough to see the situation for what it is. A means for a man to get laid. Later, after he's met with Susie and got her to agree to help him, he goes over to the neighborhood of his friends who he hadn't seen in ages, something they are mad at him for, and make Beasto prove that he's still one of them. This section only introduces his gang friends who will show up later in the flick for a Deus Ex Machina, and quite possibly make Beasto look like a flake, but they already did that with Suzi-X earlier. This appears to reinforce that trait. Beasto does confront one of Dr. Satan's monsters who patrol the cemetery, but in the movie, the Beast is comical, with Charlie Adler putting on his effeminate voice for the freak.
No, you get out of my friggin' face. No, 3, Barbara. Oh, yeah? Well, you're also on private property, you stupid baby.
In comparison to the serious tone the fight takes on in the comic, in both versions, he's eventually thrown in the dungeon. The movie sees him brought before Dr. Satan before ending up in there, while in the comic, Beasto escapes the dungeon because he's tired of listening to El Gato's story of how he hooked up with the Ultra Twins. In the movie, it was the random gag of Beasto's uncle in a thong letting loose a bunch of rats. This will not be the only shoehorned-in joke. He does escape with El Gato in both versions. In the comic, Gato gets eaten by a sewer monster while Beasto is distracted telling him a story. In the movie, he uses Gato's massive prosthetic balls to wail on the monstrous worm operated by a Japanese man in a business suit. I imagine Beasto outran Gato to get to the wedding because he doesn't show up in the rest of the movie. We meet two of the movie's other players, Suzi-X and Murray, when X infiltrates a castle inhabited by Nazi zombies, werewolves, and topless blonde women to steal the pickled head of Adolf Hitler.
Hey, I recognize this dude. He's the little tramp. He's hysterical. He's taller than I thought.
That's unfortunate. The Nazi zombies chase after them to get their Fuhrer back. Suzi-X is the blonde, one-eyed, sexy badass sister of El Superbeasto. In the comic, she took her time to respond to calls for help. Granted, it was from Beasto. She took forever to pick out an outfit and had an assortment of vehicles and body issues. In the movie, she wants to get to the action. She built a robot to assist her, along with carrying her outfits, weapons, and shapeshifts into a variety of vehicles. She's made to look smarter than she lets on and is more practical. Like with her brother, she gets an intro song. This one skims over her backstory as much as Beasto's. Well, this time she does get a backstory. She didn't like the directions her high school had given her for her future, and I don't blame her. So she ends up deciding to waste anyone that rubs her the wrong way, but has no problem partaking in wet t-shirt contests at bars. The song has like one funny delivery of a lyric.
What if you built yourself a robot, baby? What if you built yourself a horny robot that could change into all sorts of vehicles?
The animation also makes references to other stories from the comic. Her shooting sharks in a boat and dealing with a giant robot. Suzi has been Beasto's adopted sister since they were babies, but as they got older, she got sick of his lies and indulging in his vices. There are two scenes that back this up. When they first meet up, she was dealing with the Nazi zombies. As Beasto is trying to convince her to help him, Suzi alludes to his plans involve getting laid as the result, with various names for vagina. I'm amazed with how many names for a female's nether regions they come up with, and it emphasizes Beasto's lack of reliability. The other moment where this movie comes back to this is where Beasto and Suzi are hiding under the stage during a wedding ceremony, waiting to drop a bucket of blood onto Dr. Satan before Velvet kisses him. When he asks her if he ever let her down, she brings up the times he bailed on her. The first was because he was chatting with a woman at an airport bar. The second time was because he set his alarm to PM instead of AM. We can add him bailing on her earlier in the movie where he was at the haunted palace while she was at the Nazi castle. Her listing off instances of him being unreliable and Beasto making excuses was annoying. At least Archer and Lana would come along and bounce good lines off of each other when they're together. Murray is Suzi-X's multi-purpose robot partner. The comic version was named Marvin. He was orange, kinda looked like the Thing from Fantastic Four. He was understandably impatient when waiting for Suzy, and was thought of by her as useless. Murray in the flick is a grey, awkward, rambling, lovesick fool for Suzy. This version is shown to be crazy about Suzy, by saying he just had sex with her, telling people she's his girlfriend, and rearranging his vehicle mode to make it look like they're 69ing so he can squeeze her butt as she uses his stick to drive. I can imagine someone taking issue with his behavior and would wonder why doesn't he stop. Allow me to direct you to this fact about the flick. Suzi-X was the one who built him, which means she also programmed him to act like that. If she wanted him to stop, don't you think she would have reprogrammed him by now? At the end of the movie, she says she modified the cannon in his crotch so she could swing on it. Brian Posen does an okay job at playing a nervous goof. If there's an issue I have, it's his voice track sounds lower quality in places.
Yes, of course I missed you. I missed you like the stars missed the moon. I was thinking, I thought of someone. Sorry about the door. I just had sex. Hurry! You're missing it! Oh boy! Oh, never stop!
This part of the movie serves two purposes: to introduce Suzy and Murray, and to present the former in a better light than her comic book counterpart. The Nazis don't have any relation to the rest of the flick. Are they in cahoots with Dr. Satan? No. And they weren't nearly as funny as when in the comic they dealt with zombie Ringos. Yes, that's a thing. The Aryan undead would have a humorous chase scene where it's just the singer singing about what's happening in the chase.
Why does the zombie need a scarf? We bleeding bright, she fucking jumps the train. She got away and everything is great. Are you shitting me? Here comes more of them.
Yet there was a nonsensical moment when the Nazis catch up after Suzy blew up them and their Fuhrer. He then tells them about how the Nazi curse causes the zombies to rise up out of their graves around our heroes. Here's Suzy's response to that.
Correct me if I'm wrong here, but wouldn't the second coming of the Third Reich actually be the first coming of the Fourth Reich? Since this is the new one after number 3, wouldn't this technically be number 4, dipshit?
That's right. You go, girl. You know what you're talking about.
She's wrong because since they are zombies, it's the second coming of the Third Reich, not the first coming of the Fourth Reich, as they would have to be new living recruits. Even when it seems like she's surprisingly smart, she has dumb moments like these. We come to the wedding of Dr. Satan and Velvet Von Black, and he gains the sudsy powers of hell by transforming into a big and terrifying version of himself, when our heroes Mr. Q due to bickering. Our hero's attacks have no effect on him, and in a surprising turn of events, he ditches Velvet when he kidnaps Suzy. They justify this weird turn in a previous scene by showing Dr. Satan, who was a skinny nerd, having a crush on Suzy, who was captain of the high school cheer squad, most likely because she doesn't wear underwear. She must have the same immunity that her brother because they're both valuable athletes, and to punish them would hurt the school. Old television high school logic, I suppose. After going on a rampage set to the tune of the Benny Hill theme, he brings her to the top of a tall building. It's obvious she ain't interested in him at that point. Granted, the twist in the comic version of the story is just as random. It suddenly becomes Star Trek, and everyone who isn't the main cast is a Vulcan onlooker. That wouldn't be the strangest those comics got. Even stranger is Suzy being called a hoe by Velvet, and her demanding to be let down to go fight the stripper. The sudsy powers of hell are no match against a woman like Suzi-X. Her being called unsavory names was also how the fight started in the comic. It was after witnessing her brother get mortally wounded. Here it's just weird. The cat fight is accompanied by a goofy polka number describing what's happening, interrupted twice by a country singer saying it's okay to masturbate to what you're seeing and the benefits of it. It's a funny little tune on its own, but it ends up getting in the way of the surrounding men realizing that what they are seeing isn't sexy, it's ugly. Maybe up until Susie slamming Velvet's head into the concrete, but it was too late. So because Susie won the fight, Dr. Satan declares her as his new wife. When Velvet presents him with their marriage document, he stomps on her, which makes him start losing his massive body. For someone who was supposed to be a vice president of a high school chess club, that was a short-sighted move. When Beasto wonders what's happening to him, one of his friends pulls out a book on satanic magic. This causes him to flip out at how lazily written that was, and references the writer's strike the year before this flick came out. To quote Mr. Enter, pointing out your problems doesn't make them go away, and even the strange solution to getting rid of Satan's powers is forced.
Dr. Satan will shrink back to normal size if he squashes his unholy pride with the heel of his cloven foot under a crescent moon. As an albino Barry Manilow lookalike warbles through Copacabana under a shower of rainbow sparkles, whilst a disgustingly cute kitten screams a Moroccan death chant.
So the Doctor returns to his wimpy self. Beasto treats him like a boxing bag before booting him out of town, where he gets run over by the Nazi zombies, whose leader had been previously shown to be a head on a stick, and Beasto's other friends who weren't given a lot of time or purpose to the story. The movie ends by showing where everyone is after everything that happened. Susie and Murray take the new modifications for a test drive. Maybe the two got together after Murray told her he loved her. Beasto takes credit for saving the world from Dr. Satan and is working with a band on an album which he performs one of the songs on the talk show he appears on. Instead of meeting a hitchhiker making her way to Vegas to become a showgirl he picks up on the side of the road to take there in exchange for some fun. She does appear during the end credits as a topless dancer for a country duo, and with Dr. Satan dead, Velvet gets his estate, and Otto isn't loving the tasks she's making him do. That was before she adjusted the screw in his head to make him wild and mount her still injured body. This is definitely worse than seeing Dr. Satan in a frilly apron doing house chores while listening to the demands of Velvet, making him contemplate suicide. Of all the stories they could have adapted from the comic, Dr. Satan kidnapping a stripper is the least strange of the bunch. While this version gave Dr. Satan a real motivation to capture Velvet, every other player in the flick has distinct personalities, and it has more than a handful of funny moments. I would have preferred they picked one that leaned more into absurdity than sex appeal.
What are you, queer?
No, it just gets boring after a while, and I want to look for something more captivating. Like there's one story in the comic where Beasto and Susie travel to an amusement park turned Guantanamo Bay style prison inhabited by animatronic pirates to rescue a group of scientists, including one with the emotional development of a 6-year-old, from a group of aliens named the Brainiacs, led by Krakow, who are planning to transplant their brains into a giant robot for them to take over the world. Yes, that's a real story. My guess is this was meant to be a movie series based off of the adventures in the comics and perhaps some original ones, or the start of a TV series. But for some reason, neither of those happened. The world El Superbeasto inhabits takes a much goofier tone. It maintains its gore and nudity, for what that's worth. The characters are more distinct, it's almost as funny as the comic, and the choices they made when adapting this story are hit and miss. If you guys enjoy the video, leave a like, comment your own thoughts on the movie or the comic below. If you guys want to stay updated on future videos, be sure to follow me on Getter, Facebook, Tumblr, and DeviantArt. The links are in the description. And if you want to be the first to know when a new video will be up, ring that bell after you subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.